Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are stepping away from the actual battlefield and diving straight into the quiet, often completely unseen corridors, where the true balance of global power is really decided. We're going to examine negotiation, not just as a mere exchange of diplomatic pleasantries over a cup of tea, but as the systematic, rigorous, and unyielding application of state power. Now, I want you to really think about this for a second. What if diplomacy isn't actually about politeness at all, but entirely about power? About timing, preparation, and the ability to quietly shape outcomes before the other side even realizes a contest has begun. Former Indian Foreign Secretary and envoy to China, Vijay Gokhale, argues exactly that in his profound book, The Long Game. He shows us from firsthand experience that China's negotiations with India were never random. They were never improvised. Instead, they're part of a deeply disciplined, long-term strategic method. To understand China, we absolutely must understand how it uses time, patience, and leverage as literal weapons.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to follow a distinct evolutionary arc today. We will look at the illusion of politeness, followed by early missteps and costly lessons, how the tide eventually turned, modern diplomatic battlefields, and finally, we'll decode the Chinese negotiating playbook.
So, starting with part 1, the illusion of politeness, or diplomacy as statecraft.
To get this, we first have to understand the sheer historical asymmetry at play here. Right after independence, newly minted Indian leaders approached diplomacy with this strong sense of anti-imperial solidarity, idealism, and camaraderie. But they were facing hardened Chinese communists who had already negotiated with massive global powers. The Chinese viewed diplomacy strictly through the cold, unfeeling lens of statecraft. As Gokhale warns so starkly, a country that negotiates badly can lose ground without firing a single shot. That is absolutely crucial. Diplomacy isn't some soft alternative to military power, it is a direct extension of it. The illusion of mere politeness, this belief that good intentions would somehow secure peaceful borders, cost India dearly in those early years. If you want to manage a strategic competitor, studying their military might simply isn't enough. You have to study their negotiation style with the exact same rigor.
That brings us to part 2, early missteps and costly lessons, specifically looking at the 1949 and 1954 cases.
Our first real case study is India's recognition of the People's Republic of China in 1949. India's approach here was incredibly fast and highly symbolic. The Indian leadership essentially rushed to be the second non-communist nation to recognize the PRC, genuinely believing this grand gesture of goodwill would secure a peaceful neighbor. China's strategy, however, was deliberate and calculating. They absolutely did not reciprocate the rush. They dragged out the process, purposefully making India wait, and subtly forced India to sever all ties with the Kuomintang without offering a single concession in return. India effectively gave up immense strategic leverage for a fleeting, emotional, and purely symbolic win.
And you know, this vulnerability was exposed even more brutally just a few years later during the 1954 agreement on Tibet. Inheriting British rights, India held significant historical privileges in Tibet. Actually, not just privileges, but hard assets, things like military escorts and complete control over post and telegraph services. Yet India traded all of this away without securing a definitive border settlement in return. Why? Because Indian diplomats treated Tibet almost exclusively as a matter of cultural and trade exchange. They were eager to demonstrate their anti-imperialist credentials to the world. China, on the other hand, saw Tibet entirely as a geographic and border strategy. They moved with absolute cold purpose. Long after the ink was dry, China had permanently shaped the physical and strategic terrain completely in its favor.
Moving on to part 3, the turning tide, where experience finally starts to change the balance.
Because, of course, history isn't static. If we jump from those chaotic, idealistic early years of 1949 and 1954 all the way to 1998 and 2005, we see a profound maturation in Indian diplomacy. Through sheer necessity and incredibly hard, painful experience, India's diplomatic approach evolved from those symbolic, emotional gestures into hard-nosed, institutional calculations. Let's focus intensely on 1998 for a moment, the year of India's nuclear tests. This was an absolute watershed moment in the balance of power. Initially, China reacted with fierce condemnation. They fully expected India to fold under the immense geopolitical pressure, much like it might have decades prior. But India stood its ground. In the intense theater of nuclear affairs, where signaling, restraint, and absolute credibility matter more than anything else, India proved that the era of China just effortlessly dictating the terms of engagement, well, that was over.
India forced a structural shift in the relationship, proving once and for all that it was now a formidable counterpart.
And that structural shift really cemented itself in 2005, when China finally and formally recognized Sikkim as part of India. Gokhale points this out as a major diplomatic achievement, one that was born not from a single dramatic meeting or a grand gesture, but from years of relentless, grinding persistence. India finally had a stronger hand and played it with real patience. But as the analysis warns us, we shouldn't mistake a diplomatic win for total harmony. Securing recognition just shifts the active, underlying strategic competition into completely new arenas.
Which leads us right into part 4, modern diplomatic battlefields and understanding the broader ecosystem.
As the decades roll by, the battleground totally expands into what we call the broader political ecosystem. During the 2008 civil nuclear deal between India and the United States, it became painfully clear that modern diplomacy happens far, far outside of official meeting rooms. China didn't just negotiate at the table. They manipulated the entire ecosystem around it. They utilized informal networks, influenced left-wing political alignments within India, and used outside messaging to actively constrain India's options. It just proves that to win today, you can't simply be a good orator. You must map out and navigate the entire domestic and international influence environment surrounding your adversary.
But then, we see India mastering this very same ecosystem in the 2019 UN Security Council listing of Masood Azhar. For a full decade, 10 years, India pushed for this listing. China deployed its classic playbook, calculated, endless technical holds and bureaucratic delays specifically designed to exhaust Indian diplomats. But this time, India achieved a massive breakthrough. And this wasn't luck. India aggressively utilized international institutions, mobilized overwhelming support from the United States, the UK, and France, and systematically isolated China diplomatically until the geopolitical cost of their resistance just became far too high to bear.
Finally, let's turn to part 5, the Chinese negotiating playbook, where we actually decode the strategy.
Make no mistake, Chinese negotiation is a highly crafted psychological instrument. It relies on meticulous, almost obsessive institutional preparation. They carefully select the venue, often deliberately seating foreign diplomats facing the glaring sun or placing them in overly grand cavernous rooms just to make them feel small and isolated. They use non-official channels to test the waters long before formal talks ever begin. They use flattery to totally disarm their counterparts, and ironically, they are absolute masters at playing the victim to secure the moral high ground. Above all else, they control time. They'll stretch negotiations out for years to exhaust you, or suddenly compress them to force a panicked error. These aren't just quirky personality traits, they are literally weaponized statecraft.
So, the really stark contrast we have to draw here is this. Going into negotiations casually, relying on personal charm, emotion, or the pursuit of short-term tactical wins, that is a definitive path to failure. The Chinese method relies on deep institutional memory. Chinese diplomats will literally study negotiation transcripts from 30 years ago just to find a single tiny inconsistency in your current argument. For India to succeed, negotiators cannot just represent themselves or even a current administration. They have to act as a seamless extension of the state, matching China's seriousness with absolute institutional coherence and a very long-term vision.
Which really brings us to the absolute core thesis of Gokhale's work. To quote him, "Studying earlier negotiations reveals clues for future ones. Knowing the adversary is essential." This is a wake-up call for absolute strategic literacy. Understanding the political, institutional, and psychological makeup of your counterpart isn't optional anymore. Negotiation is not a soft alternative to hard power. It is the very arena where hard power is actually realized.
We've traced the entire arc today, from those early, painful missteps rooted in the sheer illusion of politeness, right through to the hard-won maturity of a rising global power. We have decoded a Chinese playbook built on immense discipline and unyielding strategic patience. The board is now set for the future, and the rules of engagement have fundamentally changed. So the final question remains: as the geopolitical stakes reach historic highs, is India actually prepared to win the next phase of the long game? Thank you for joining me to explore this truly vital topic.